What's up, YouTube? ProTech here, back with another video for you guys today. Today I'm starting a new series called Journey to Rank 1 Explained. And as you can see here, I have gotten to rank 3 on the North American server. And I'm going to be recording the gameplay, and I'm going to be voice-overing the gameplay. So there will be no game sounds, but I will be commentating the thought process and things of that nature. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so right off the bat here, I can see 2 diamond, I can see random Zerg, and I can see that we are random Zerg as well. So, going into a match of 2v2, there's a lot of different things that you have to think about that, just sort of has evolved over the years. Ever since the game went free to play, there just has been a gigantic influx in smurfing, right? And so, when you're playing a game, there was a time where you could look at players' ranks, and you would think to yourself, okay, well, they're diamond, so I can just kind of do whatever I want, right? But, well, now that the game is free to play, there's so many people who are smurfing, and you can't really assume that, said players are diamond, right? So that's the first thing that I'm thinking about in this game. So, you'll notice I placed my racks that way. It's kind of risky to do that, especially against Zerg random, because if it's 2 Zerg and they've both gone for, an early pool, obviously you don't want to have that gap in your wall at that time. You'd rather have a full wall, right? So I'm essentially just sort of rolling the dice that the random player did not, in fact, spawn Zerg. And it's kind of more or less a gamble because, the likelihood of him actually getting Zerg is 33.3%, right? So anyway, it's a gamble. So, there I check the race, and, I'm just opening. I have decided that I'm going to go for just a standard Reaper expand. Now, because I don't know what the race is, you'll see some things that I do here. First thing is the rally point of my Reaper. I don't know if the player has spawned Terran, and if he has spawned Terran, there are quite a few things that can happen at the beginning of the game. So, for example, if the Terran player has not opened with a gas first, kind of like how I did, if the Terran player opens with a Rax into a gas, and you have opened with a gas into a Rax, that means that his Reaper has map control, right? And so even venturing off into the map, as far as I'm going, is kind of risky. But I have an Overlord here, so I just decided that, okay, so if he did go gas first, if he is in fact Terran, and he did go gas first, then we should meet at the same time, and I'll see it first because I have an Overlord here, and my opponent does not. So here we have a standard reactor factory open, right? So as you can see, I'm just sitting there chilling. I have to decide whether I'm going to go for a reactor on my racks or a tech lab. And the way you make this decision is that if you know there is a Zerg on the map, you open with a reactor. If there is no Zerg on the map, I like to open with clones. In other words, go for a tech lab. So after some time has passed here, you see I've decided to move my Reaper across the map to scout. See what I can find. Now I can see the Zerg here, so I want to check this natural first. to see what the race is, right? So now from here, I know exactly what I'm going to play. As soon as I saw that CC on the low ground, from this point, I'm playing mech. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that playing mech is the strongest or even the best. But for me, and the way that I play the game, and my stylistic play, it fits. But more importantly, I don't know what the skill level of my teammate is. And in my experience in solo queue, in order to make bio sort of play work, you really have to have a teammate who isn't going to drag the team down, right? And more often than not, that's really just not the case. So, if I see TZ, I am going mech. So at this point, I know that he has gone for a starport, and I don't know what the Zerg is going, right? I don't know if he's going roaches, I don't know if he's going lings, but typically speaking, if you see a reactored factory with a starport like that, you're likely going to see a lot of Zerglings, and so I'm queuing up Hellions to deter that. And again, it's just a guess. I mean, I don't know what the Zerg is going, but most of the time, that's sort of how it plays out. So instead of going for Blue Flame here, I went for Cyclone Speed. And as you'll see, the way that the game pans out, it would have been better for me just to stick to Hellions. And because I didn't stick to Hellions, my teammate ended up taking a lot more damage than he probably otherwise would have. But at the same time, it is a starport, right? And you don't know what's going to come out of the starport. You don't know if it's going to be a Liberator. You don't know if it's going to be a Banshee. You don't know if it's going to be a drop ship. And regardless of whatever comes out of that factory, Cyclones are quite good against that, right? So now, you see they're crossing the map here, right? And what I'm doing here is I'm quickly building these supply depots to limit the surface area of these lings. You know, create a nice little choke point here so that if he does decide to attack me, he can't just surround all my shit for free. So here you can see my teammate has gone for the spine crawlers. You don't want to do this, especially if you have a Terran teammate and you're like in a mirror matchup. And the reason you don't want to do this is because you have defender's advantage, right? So even if he does this type of an all-in, because he's fighting into the opponent's macro, even if you have less units, you still have defender's advantage, so you don't need to go spines. But anyway, so you can see this push happens here, and my teammate quite actually has no units, right? And so now, and now I can see that he has a macro hatchery at an unreasonable timing. So at this point, what I can see is that my opponents are both playing meta, and they're both playing reasonable StarCraft, whereas my teammate is not really, okay? And that's what I'm thinking at this point. So with decent micro and queens and some ling macro, we're able to stave this pressure off, right? But at this point, we are incredibly far behind. And the reason, obviously, is because my teammate has lost all of his workers at his main. So now I have to make a choice. I'm either going to go up to the third command center, which obviously I did here, right? Or I have to go up to 5 factory on 2 base and try to do like an all-in and win the game, right? I felt as if in this game, I felt that I was really far ahead of the Terran player based on how these opens shaped up. And so I opted for the third command center and play a heavier macro game. The other reason I chose to do this was because the Zerg, the opponent Zerg, he created a lot of Lings, which means he's going to have a late third. And so if I go for the third CC into the upgrades, then in theory, I should be able to win this game by myself. And that is the thought process. So this dropship, I'm not exactly sure what the right choice was here. And this is not something that you will typically see. At least I don't see it. But it was pretty smart. It tricked me because he doesn't actually have anything in this dropship. But what it did was it made me turn around. And the reason I chose to turn around to attack this dropship is because my teammate has already lost a ton of drones. If he loses any more drones, he's completely out of the game, and it's actually going to be 1v2. So instead of attacking with him, I decided to turn around and deal with this, just in case. But, in hindsight, doing that, it was just a fake. And I fell for the bait, basically. So when I saw that creep in the middle of the map there, and then I saw the hatch, I started to get a little worried because I wasn't actually expecting there to be a third hatch there. And so I started to question whether or not going up to this, doing this super heavy macro play after their opens was correct. But you make choices, you live with them, right? So anyway, at this point, I'm still fairly confident that because of how the opens, because of how the game has evolved, and how my opponents have, played out the game, I think that if I play a solid macro game, I should be able to win this game by myself. And then, I don't have like an exact number for how many clones, but it's just kind of like a feeling, right? Like, at this point, I feel like I have enough anti-air in the form of cyclones. And so at this point, I decide to transition into tank Hellion. So at this point, I see Bio, and if you saw me there, upgrade Blue Flame Hellion immediately, because if you're going Hellions, you need to have that against Bio. Infantry, right? Like, biological tags, the Blue Flame Hellion does more damage, significantly more damage to bio tags. And at this point, he pokes in there. I don't know if the Terran player has a third yet or not, because he doesn't necessarily have to take that third that my teammate just scouted. He could have taken the third in the mid. And so I decide that I'm going to go up to a fourth base and play a longer game, which gets canceled. So fortunately for me, I had made my siege tanks at the exact right timing. And if I had stayed on, because, another scenario that can come about is that if you don't have it, like, typically speaking, in TZ versus TZ, you're not going to see Roach infantry. What you're typically going to see is mech and mutas. And so transitioning into the tanks without the knowledge of Aspire was a little risky. Because if he had gone for Muta rather than Roach Ravager, I would have been in some trouble, right? Because while I do have a relatively healthy Cyclone count, dealing with something like a Mutalisk feed, where the Terran player sends, minerals and gas to his teammate to just do a Muta explosion, well, how many Hellions do I have here? 2, 4, 6. I've only got 8. So if it's like a Muta explosion, I've only got 8 Cyclones. That's not going to deal with 16 Mutas, right? So I got a little lucky in the fact that that isn't what happened. But as soon as I saw those roaches, I knew from that point forward that all I really have to do is just continue to macro and either hit a 1-1 timing or a 2-2 timing upgrades, right? But I do want to take this 4th base because I know that my composition is much stronger than Bio and like Roach Ravager, mainly because of the terrain. You know, the defensive advantage that you gain on this map in this particular scenario just makes sense to take a 4th right now. Because even if I decide to push, I can still likely defend it, right? Which I decide to do here. And he commits to this very foolishly. And this counter was a little scary. Because, you know, essentially this is just 1v2 at this point, and when you're playing in a mobile composition against 2 players who are playing mobile compositions, it can get a little tricky on how to win. You have to be like, you know, those 2 tanks that I've got up the ramp there, you have to be really quick about, you know, sieging up your macro and getting everything in the right spot. But after I cleaned all that up, at this point, I'm very confident that I can win the game. And so I decide to push across the map, clear the creep, set up some defensive tanks back here, and go for the killing blow. Because I cleaned up the Terran push, the Zerg player traded very poorly. The time was definitely now to make this push. And also, I saw drones. I don't know if you caught it in the game, but there was at some point in this game I saw a drone transfer go up this way. So I know that there is a base here. Plus, it's 10 minutes into the game. I mean, why wouldn't there be a base there? Especially if he's had that 3rd base for what, 5 minutes. And he was sending his queen down there, so I scanned, because I thought maybe there was a base there. And that was kind of a waste of a scan. I don't really know why I did that. It's kind of stupid. But this, like, you can see how well these two tanks are just tanking all of this, and this is sort of, you know, back when I was talking about the decision to go up to the 3rd CC and the factories and the armories. This is the result of that decision. Like, the Zerg army can't really do anything to my army, right? I mean, it takes 12 years and that tank even survived. So from this point forward, you know, it's pretty straightforward. They can't really fight my army. I have better upgrades. I have more. I have better eco. And so, you know, going back to the decision making about going up to that 3rd command center versus going up to the 5 factory, there was never really any way to truly make the right decision. But when you've played enough games, you know, because I've got hundreds of thousands of games under my belt at this point, right? It's sort of like a gut feeling, right? Because again, you don't know if I didn't know at that point if the Zerg player had taken a 3rd. I had no idea what the Terran was going exactly. But when you've played hundreds of thousands of games, you just get these gut feelings. You get these feelings that, you know, okay, this is the right choice based on how many times I've been in this scenario, etc., right? So anyway, I'm pretty new to explaining my games. This might be maybe not a very good video. I don't know, but if you like it, leave a like. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments below. And with that win, it puts me at rank 3 on the server. I'm down by about 100 points. So I'll see you guys with episode 2. Have a good day.